Today's meeting, we are really lucky to have a guest speaker, and without further ado, I will welcome and hand over to Ann Gresswell. Thank you, Ann.
Great. So I'm going to be talking about the Halliwick Concept. I wonder if there's a few of you who have maybe done a Halliwick course or have used Halliwick in the work situation. Would you like to give us either a thumbs up, or you can use the icons in Zoom, just to have an idea if anybody has done any Halliwick. Lorna said she has. That's Paul, I can see. I can't see everybody, so a few. Okay. The Halliwick Concept, it was developed for teaching disabled people to participate in water activities. So it was specifically set up originally thinking of disabled people, but it actually works for everybody. And quite a lot of the points in the Halliwick 10-point programme are appropriate for swimming teaching in any situation. So, I'm Ann Gresswell, as I've been introduced. I'm involved with the Oxford Swan Swimming Club, which is a swimming club for disabled people. I'm also a senior lecturer for the International Halliwick Association, and I chair the education committee of the Halliwick Association of Swimming Therapy. The Halliwick AST is the UK Halliwick Association. I've been involved with Halliwick for longer than perhaps I want to remember. Some of you have joined because you saw this advert. The things that are bullet pointed there are what we cover on a 4-day foundation course, which is the first Halliwick course that people do. In 30 minutes, I can't actually cover all of that, so I hope that doesn't matter. I hope I'll give you a good idea about what Halliwick is about. Some of the photos I'm going to be using are old photos, because I know that many of the associations now, Swim England and the Swimming Teachers Association, recommend that, I'm just reading my notes, recommend that many organisations say that helpers need to wear t-shirts or a top when they're working in the water with swimmers. So I'm sorry, my photos are old and we're not all wearing tops. So it very much was developed originally for recreational swimming, and that's what happens in my swimming club. But it's used a lot in education as well. I worked for a long time as a swimming teacher and then as a classroom teacher in a special school. And what I really liked was being able to back up what I did in the classroom in the water. And we had that very great talk from Lorna called More Than Just Swimming, Cross-Curricular Links for the Pool. She had some amazing ideas and a lot of things that I've used as well. As well, it's moved, Halliwick is used a lot for rehabilitation and therapy by physiotherapists who are working in the water. As I say, it was designed for disabled people, but it works for anyone. My best example is we had a girl with cerebral palsy who we taught to swim. We taught her younger brother at the same time, and he learned to swim. And after a few years, the mother admitted that she couldn't swim. She was very shy. She said, "I can't swim, but would you teach me?" We did teach her, and she ended up being a very good instructor. A bit later on than that, another year or so, the father admitted that he couldn't swim, and he was a big muscular man. He admitted he couldn't swim, and we taught him. He was the most challenging because he was very dense, very muscular. So the philosophy of the Halliwick Concept. The first thing is water happiness, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but our very first starting point is we want people to be happy in the water because they learn so much better then. We don't use flotation aids, so that's a bit different to perhaps many of the ways people are taught. It does mean you have to have a helper for each swimmer, for those who can't stand on the bottom and haven't got good balance control. And that can be the challenge. When I worked in the special school, I spent a lot of time getting helpers. So I was in contact with parents and friends, the university here in Oxford, and schools for people doing Duke of Edinburgh Awards, to get as many helpers as possible. And we use very much games, activities, singing and music in teaching. That's always been part of Halliwick. And in school with a group, it was very easy to work in a group and to use games and singing and music. In our club situation, people come at different times and are all working at different levels. But at the end, we always get together in a group and we go round in a circle, very simple thing. And then each swimmer, we call people who are learning, we still call them swimmers. Each swimmer indicates that the circle has to change direction so that they take control of the group for that bit of working. This is a very traditional Halliwick game called Eggs for Breakfast, where the swimmers are pretending to sleep and the instructor at the back of the circle will throw the eggs, which I'm sure many of you know that you can blow in the water. He'll throw those into the middle and shouts that it's time to get up. And then the swimmers come up into a vertical position. Eggs for breakfast. The other one of the philosophies of the Halliwick concept is that we teach from in the water, not from the pool side. That's even more important for many disabled people who find somebody standing on the pool side it's difficult to relate to, maybe difficult to hear, difficult to see. So we actually teach from in the water. We have an order that we teach in, and I'm going to be going through that with you. Progressing at the swimmer's pace, not rushing them, but always seeing that they're progressing. And that might be very small steps, but those steps can be so important. And very much the emphasis on ability, because the ability in the water can be very, very different to the ability on land. The very first course that I was lecturing on, a young man came along to be on the course, cerebral palsy, in a wheelchair, couldn't stand, he couldn't sit unsupported, but I did know him. And so for the course, when we went to the pool, I took him to the deep end, got him sat on the pool side, standing behind him because he hadn't got sitting balance, and he just rolled into the water. He could actually do somersaults in the water. So, as I say, ability in the water can be very different to that on land. Always thinking positively. And the philosophy applies to the helpers as well. So when we're training helpers, we want them to be able to do the things that we're expecting our swimmers to learn. So I said we have an order of teaching. So we have something called the 10-point program. And the start is mental adjustment, happiness in the water. And I'm going to go through each point in turn. So the starting point is being happy in the water. Point 10 is somebody actually swimming independently. So let's go through those points. So mental adjustment, and part of that is learning breath control in the water. And I'm sure many of you know what we call poached eggs. I don't know if you have other names for them, blowing those in the water. These eggs were actually designed by James Macmillan, the person who started Halliwick. So I wish he'd patented them at the time, because it would have helped Halliwick financially. But it's also about getting used to getting your face wet, your hair wet. The piece of equipment I like most to have is a sponge, because they're so good for squeezing above your head and getting water on your hair and washing games and things. So sponges I enjoy. So all those things. Water happiness, getting confident and blowing, and also humming we teach as well, which is a very good skill for when you get on to more advanced water skills, going underwater, stopping water going up your nose. So we teach humming and blowing at the same time. Disengagement is the process of becoming independent in the water. So in this picture, the swimmers are moving from one helper to another. It's a game that we call pass the parcel. So you're not becoming reliant on just one helper, and get used to moving from one helper to another. But it's all the areas of independence. So it can be having less physical support, having less verbal support, being reminded to blow initially, and then hopefully it becomes an automatic thing. Just maybe getting the feet off the pool floor, doing some jumps, and eventually moving into deep water. So all those processes are becoming more independent. Right, points 3, 4, 5, and 6 are rotations and the control of those. So at this point, I'm going to stop share, and then I'm going to try and demonstrate with my model. If you're not on speaker, you might want to go to speaker so you can see more clearly. So on Zoom, usually in the top right-hand corner, you can go to speaker. At the moment, I seem to have Nicola as a speaker.
I can see you clearly, Anne, so you're good on speaker view.
So I'm hoping you can all see my model. My model is rather old and has become an amputee as time goes on, so it's one-legged person, but I hope you can see that. So the first rotation we're going to think about is what we call transversal rotation. So you now need to think about the axis is going from one side to the other. So it's that axis. So it would be anything lying back in the water. So you're learning to go onto your back, but also being able to come up to the vertical. So transversal rotation, anything on that axis could be going right forwards. And then we usually teach people to roll over to come back to the vertical. So anything around that axis. A somersault, forwards or backwards, would be a complex transversal rotation. The next rotation is sagittal rotation. So now you've got to imagine that this person has an arrow has gone through them from front to back, and it's anything about that axis, so it's that sideways movement. So learning just to put your ear in the water. Learning if you're starting to fall, how to control it. Walking sideways in the water, that's sagittal rotation. Like longitudinal rotation is an axis going through the head, through the body, down to the ground. So that could be just in the vertical. And for some of our people with disabilities, that might be an important skill to learn, just to be able to turn around, chat to your neighbour. Often we're thinking of it, though, in the horizontal. So it would be learning to control if you're rolling to one side. And if you are an amputee, as this person is, you will find it more difficult to be symmetrical in the water. So you have to work harder at finding that balanced position and control of that longitudinal rotation. The full longitudinal rotation is to roll over and then come back into what we say is a safe breathing position. So that's a full longitudinal rotation. Now, I know most of you, I think most, if not all of you, are swimming teachers. And so you will all be aware of how important it is when you're doing front crawl. You've got to have that rotation, be able to turn your head and control it. But also, even when you're swimming breaststroke, if you've got good control of longitudinal rotation, you get a better breaststroke. So that control is so important for swimmers, and especially important for somebody who is disabled and is asymmetrical. The final one is combined rotation, and that can be a combination of any of those rotations. The one we teach early on is a combined rotation where if the swimmer is in the vertical, maybe they haven't got very good breath control, so they can't really put their face in the water yet. So as they fall forwards, they turn their head and they roll into a safe breathing position without the face going in the water. So a good safety skill. That's a combination of transversal rotation and longitudinal rotation. Of course, an advanced one would be swimming in a race and turning at the end of the pool. Okay, so we'll go back to the PowerPoint now. And then I've got a few pictures to back that up. Oh, no, I've got to go to share screen. Okay, so those 4 rotations. So here's a swimmer practicing transversal rotation, and we want swimmers to do things in the easiest way possible. I know often you can teach someone to come to the vertical by doing a sort of sculling type movement. But what we're doing is going for a very easy way, just tucking the chin in, reach the arms forwards, and the legs will sink. And that's what he's doing there. Here's that game again, eggs for breakfast, that I showed you at the beginning, and they will all do that transversal rotation to come to the vertical to get an egg for breakfast. Sagittal rotation, so it might just be putting your ear in the water. As I said in our club, at the end, we all get into a circle and we walk round sideways, and that means you're controlling sagittal rotation. Longitudinal rotation, learning to roll right over. So he's turned his head, he's reached his arm across, and he's going onto his front, and then an easy way, easy as possible, by turning his head and coming back into a safe breathing position. And here's again the girl in the red hat, the red swimming hat, is doing quite a good longitudinal rotation, learning it. The little boy, if his helper got him to use the other arm, he would also be practicing it, but in that situation, he's not. Combined rotation in this situation, learning with 2 helpers. So this little girl was with the lady on the right, was in the vertical position, and as she falls forwards, the helper says, "Look at me," and she turns her head and comes round onto her back, and there's another helper there to catch her. So that's combined rotation. And this young man is practicing it on his own. So that was the 4 rotations. Now we're on to point 7, which is upthrust. So it's learning that the water pushes you up, can support you. So all those things that we all teach, things like picking up things off the pool floor, trying to sit on the pool floor and feeling that the water brings you up, getting into a mushroom float position and feeling, if you go underwater, get into a mushroom float and then feel how it brings you back to the surface. So that's point 7. Perhaps I should have said at the beginning, going through the 10-point program on the foundation course, we take an hour doing this. So it really is just a quick look at the 10-point program. Balance in stillness. So it's learning to be able to be still in the water, even if the water is turbulent. So in this situation, the swimmer is in what we call the chair position, a good stable position, as stable as you can be in the water. And I think the helper would now be letting go of her and then creating turbulence behind her, see if she can stay in that position or going round to the sides and creating turbulence. So it could be in the vertical. But again, it could be floating with a swimmer floating on their back. And again, this helper might be there just to give the person confidence, but if they are confident, he can then start to make turbulence to the side, and can that person control the rotations and stay still on his back. Excuse me a minute. Right, point 9 is turbulent gliding. In this situation, you start by supporting your swimmer, and then you walk backwards and let go of them if they've learned to float, they've done balance in stillness. And as you walk backwards, they move backwards in your turbulence. You can make more turbulence by moving your hands under their shoulders to move to create more turbulence. I'll stop share for a moment and just see, can you all see me? The best way to make turbulence is with that movement. Now I might be able to share a little bit of video. This video was just made at our swimming club by the sister of the person in the water. So it wasn't a professionally made video, and let's hope it works for you. I've gone into, hang on a second, I maybe can't show you. Can you see the video now? Let's hope.
Yes, you can.
All right, go back to the beginning. Okay. If I just tell you before we go, this girl has got profound and multiple learning difficulties and very, very limited movements. But she has learned to float. And as you can maybe see, the helper now lets go and is moving backwards through the water, and she goes with the helper. Now you can imagine how, I'm going to stop it there, I hope. You can maybe imagine how exciting that is, that feeling for the swimmer. And certainly we've had parents, you know, who are almost in tears when they see that happen. To see somebody moving independent, well, they're not making the movement, but they're moving through the water.
And I'd like to chip in there because that turbulent gliding is just brilliant for exactly those reasons, in terms of getting your swimmers moving independently and not being held. It's such a very, very effective skill that you can provide in your lessons. And
as I say, we've had swimmers who are very, very severely physically disabled and severe learning difficulties, and it's just so exciting for them. Our next move, of course, is to get her to move on to point 10 to get some propulsion, but that's going to be quite a challenge because she has such limited movements. So we've now got to the end of the 10-point programme. So point 10 is simple progression and basic swimming movement. So this swimmer here is showing simple progression. He can just use his hands. What I like to teach is to say, just clap your sides and just let your hands move away from the side. So all I say is clap your sides. And it's surprising what movement swimmers can get who've got very limited movements, but can just do that and just clap their sides. It could be, if they can, doing a sculling movement. So, you know, proper sculling movement, but that's quite a challenge to get that turn of your hands in and out. So just clapping your sides is where we would start. It could be a leg kick, but for many of the disabled swimmers we work with, when you say to kick the legs, the knees bend as well as the hips. They find that very difficult to isolate the movement, so it's just the hips. And the knees bend, which means if the knees come out of the water, they tend to sink more and they don't get much progression. And sometimes they actually end up going feet first. So we tend to go for using the hands first, the arms first. And then a basic swimming movement, if they can manage this and have got the mobility in their shoulders, is to bring the arms out to the side and then clap them down to their sides. So getting more propulsion. So that's a basic swimming movement. So just to show it with I don't know what you call it, but this is something I like to show because it shows mental adjustment and disengagement around the outside. They go through the whole of the 10-point program, the mental adjustment and disengagement. But in the middle is what you're aiming for, which is someone who can move through the water and is as safe as you can be in the water. And all those other points make that possible. So as I said, the Halliwick Association of Swimming Therapy is our national organisation, and that's the website address. We have the chair of our organisation keeps the website up to date. He's very, very good at that. He actually learnt to swim through Halliwick, so he's gone through it all. So that's the website. And we have a large number of publications, including ones on games and activities, and one on songs to use in the water, and there's a CD that goes with that, and a few videos and things as well. So if you're interested in attending a Halliwick course or organising one, we're always trying to find suitable pools. Do go to our website. There's details there of any courses that are being run that are open to other people. Or if you've got a suitable pool and want to organise one, there's details of who to get in touch with there. Or you're very welcome to get in touch with me, and my email is there at the bottom.